What is up? Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday, everyone. And above all, everything, happy Mother's Day as well, too. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, all the stepmamas out there, all the everybody, dog mamas, everybody, in terms of this day being applied to you. Without y'all, without your love, none of this would be possible right now when it comes to what everything that is around us every day, the earth, this life that we live, and just in general being able to be in existence. Welcome everyone to another very special, different episode of the 23rd Hour. My name is Maurice Prophet. I am your host, and today is it's a bit of it's a different episode today. We're not going to be doing a review of a pay-per-view that we typically do, like a post pay-per-view review show. But this episode really is about honoring the life and the legacy of SABU. Earlier today, on May 11th, we received word that SABU, very, very famous, very well known, very popular, legendary professional wrestler who made his name majorly big in the 90s. Passed away today. And wrestling fans such as myself and others who share the generational pool with me this is a significant hit. This is a significant hit, a significant blow. This is one of those losses. There's always that. You always, as wrestling fans, are so used to always being, seeing the ones that we seen in the ring, move on and receive their wings, but they're ones that you always say that's one of those ones, and that you can include Owen Hart in that category, Eddie Guerrero. All the losses, are all significant, obviously, but these ones really do kind of cut a little bit deeper. And SABU is that. SABU was that, and I just felt that it was. I felt very compelled to be able to come on tonight, do a very special episode with you guys, and just kind of talk about SABU a little bit and share some memories. And this is all off the cuff as well too, so nothing's planned or anything. I was just all day today as I was doing some stuff around the house. I was doing some editing for some B-side stuff, and I can't help but continue to keep on thinking about SABU. I can't stop thinking about him. I can't stop thinking about his matches that we've grown to love him for, and the moments that we've seen him be involved with. We've seen him involved in some wars in the ring, and these are the type of wars that really stick to your ribs, and stick with you. And I was like, I can't let this. If I want to be able to talk about this and be able to kind of get out, it's best for me from a therapeutic standpoint to be able to just kind of chop it up with y'all. And I think that this is a great opportunity for not only myself, but anyone else as well, too, who's want to jump in and, kind of talk about, their memories about him as well, too. Please feel free to join in the chat and everything. Like I said, this is not a typical 23rd hour episode. This is not even going to be that long, to be honest with you. I just want to be able to kind of just come in here, just kind of, chop up game with y'all and just be able to kind of vent a little bit as well, too, about, just losing him in general. So it's going to be completely raw and off the cuff and very organic. This weekend in general for wrestling, I was telling the mid-card mess back on Friday morning, who would have thought that Mother's Day weekend, going into this weekend, Mother's Day weekend would actually rival WWE WrestleMania weekend as possibly this was possibly one of the best weekends of pro wrestling this year, considering all that was going on. So going into the weekend, this was a loaded weekend of just events, of matches, of really key shows that were coming on when it came to just what was happening in the landscape of pro wrestling. So, for example, on Friday, House of Glory had their show Waging War that was taking place here in Chicago at the Logan Auditorium. In addition, New Japan Pro Wrestling, they had the Resurgence pay-per-view that took place in Ontario, California, that took place on Friday. So we're talking about House of Glory was Friday. New Japan Pro Wrestling was Friday as well too, and then you went on Saturday. From the sports and entertainment side, you had WWE. They had Backlash that was going on. In addition, Major League Wrestling and CMLL, they had Lucha Azteca take place here in Chicago last night. Backlash is in Missouri, by the way, St. Louis, Missouri. And in addition, Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling had their show last night as well too. That was in the Maple Leaf Garden, and their card was ridiculously stacked. And this is not. And in addition, you also had AEW. Oh no, I'm sorry, Collision came on Thursday. Never mind, scratch that. But also, you had all your other indies that were going on just across the country, just in general. But this weekend overall was a major weekend for pro wrestling, and you didn't even have a TNA or an AEW supercard as well too. You had all these other promotions that were going strong this weekend, and in some aspects, some wrestlers were working double duty. Like I know Gabe Kidd, he wrestled at both the New Japan show on Friday, and then he flew out to Toronto the next day for the Maple Leaf show on Saturday. You had Matt Riddle, he wrestled the House of Glory match on Friday, and then went across town and went to the next day and went to do the CMLL Major League Wrestling show on Saturday. So, these guys are putting in a lot of work. Now, I say all this because, the wrestling in general there's a lot that's poured into the sport. There's a whole lot that's poured into the sport from a unconditional love standpoint. And we see these men and women put their bodies on the line for us on a day in, day out, night in, night out, week in, week out, month in, month out basis, for us. And as fans, you get lost. You get lost in so much of how amazing and how fortunate we really are to be able to have these incredible outlets with these amazing athletes. So going into this weekend, considering everything that was going on in terms of these stacked cards, these amazing events and all that was taking place, you really were telling yourself, nothing could be better than this. And it really felt that way as well too. But then we wake up this morning, going deep into the morning, and then we see the news about SABU. And I prefaced all that because so much is taken away from these wrestlers because they give us so much in return. We take so much in return, but they give us so much. They pour so much into the ring to be able to give us moments, give us memories that will last forever for us, and that will be stuck to our souls, forever. And I'm not trying to sound like corny or hokey or all like that, but that really is what the truth is in terms of what these men and women deliver to us. So SABU, man. See, my introduction to SABU, I remember I kept reading about him all the time. I kept reading about him. And what I mean by that was that back when I started watching wrestling I'm about to date myself, so, go ahead and do the math, kids. I started watching wrestling in 92, the summer of 92, late summer, and going into SummerSlam 92. And so I was very new with pro wrestling. And as you all know, as you remember, anyone who's a fan of it, as you remember, when you were new to pro wrestling, everything was just so exciting. Everything was so thrilling and exciting. And so I need more of it. Wait, what is that? What does that mean? What does that do? Everything was so brand new. And during that time, especially when I was learning about pro wrestling, a buddy of mine who was pretty much kind of put me up on game. His name is Jeff Lackton, and shout out to Jeff. Jeff is I know we're Facebook friends and everything. I know he's out there somewhere, but Jeff was putting me up on game because he had been watching wrestling for some years, before that. So he was saying, hey, this is what you want to watch. Superstars is good. You want to watch WWF Challenge that comes on late at night though. If you can watch WCW, I'm like, well, what's WCW? And they told me what they like. How come they don't fight WWF guys? He's like, can't. They're promotion or whatever. And he also he said here's a bunch of wrestling magazines. So feel free to look at them and borrow them and everything. And it was a whole stack. I remember it was a whole stack of old WWF magazines. The one with Elizabeth on the cover of it, the one with Ultimate Warrior on the cover of it, the one with Sergeant Slaughter and Hulk Hogan on the cover of it. Those old WWF magazines. And mixed in those magazines as well were these magazines called PWI, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And a lot of the old school wrestling heads know exactly what I'm talking about. Y'all know what I'm getting at. And the PWI magazines, those were the magazines that were like the holy grails. Like the WWF magazine was cool because you can see about what Jake the Snake was talking about and do a little spotlight on Roddy Piper or whatever may have you, or see what the results were at at Survivor Series 89 or whatever it may have you. It was all good and everything like that. But PWI didn't just stop with WWF news. Like they gave you the news about WCW, they gave you the news about the NWA, they gave you the news about all the independent promotions as well too that were going on. What's up, Clint? What are you talking about? Hold on one second. Exactly right. Now he gets that exactly. So right. They went through all of the promotions, the territories, and all that good stuff and everything. And if you remember too, and Clint, I know you remember PWI was like, for the most part, it was a black and white magazine. The cover obviously was in color, and I think they probably had like a couple like special pages that were in color in the inside. But for the most part, the entire rest of the magazine was all black and white. And it was a lot of like very seedy photographs, from cameras. And it was a lot of just like text about what the results were in these promotions, who wrestled who in these promotions. They also had rankings as well, like how they rank guys. So you would want to like kind of keep up with these magazines to see like, okay, where's my favorite wrestler this month ranked according to PWI? Like where they ranked? They ranked at number 4. What? They were number 3 last month. What the heck? You know what I mean? So you had that type of like, you had like this guide really, that was giving you a very bird's eye view of everything from a pro wrestling landscape. And it was fun. It was so fun reading those magazines and looking at those. Now, and the thing was with the PWI, that was how you determine who really was a true wrestling fan back then as well. So that really was that was like the litmus test of who really was into wrestling. Like if you were just reading the WWF magazine, that's cool and everything, you know what I mean? But like you probably only limited yourself to just WWF, and that's fine. But back then, if you were like reading PWI on a consistent basis, you really had a keen interest into understanding what was happening not only in WWF, who was hot in WCW, who was hot in the NWA, who was hot in Smoky Mountain. You wanted to see who these teams were and everything. So you see pictures of them. You read their stats. You read the championships. What they were holding, who they lost to, who they won the titles by. All of these variables that really kept you up to date when it came to what was happening in the pro wrestling scene back in the day. Now, because I would read the PWI magazine on a regular basis, I kept seeing this one guy in there. They kept on referencing this one dude in there who always stood out to me, who continuously kept on just sticking out to me, where I'm just like, who are you? What are you? I think you know where I'm getting at. This was my introduction to SABU. All right. This was my introduction to SABU because not only because we're talking about like 92 here, 92, 93, right? So, we're talking about being a wrestling fan in a world where, we're seeing the likes, we're seeing the likes of The Undertaker. We're seeing the likes of Earthquake and Typhoon. We're seeing the likes of the Beverly Brothers, okay? We're seeing the likes of the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. We're seeing the likes, of the Berserker over here, right? We're seeing the likes of the Big Boss Man. That's what we're seeing on a regular basis, from a national standpoint on television. So we see these characters that we can pretty much understand, what they're all about. You see Earthquake, you hear his name, you see his size, you know what's up, all right? You see the Big Boss Man, you see his size, you see his gimmick, you see the nightstick, you know what's up, all right? You see the Undertaker, you see the size, you see the wardrobe and all that good stuff and everything, you know what's up, right? All right. So it doesn't take a genius to figure these things out. But then here's this guy in this magazine, and really quick, you read these magazines, and a lot of these wrestlers they're using their proper names. They're using their government names and everything. So you're reading about Brad Armstrong, you know what I'm saying? You're reading about these kind of guys and everything, who are wrestling in the indie scene. And then you see this name that keeps on popping up, just saying SABU, SABU, SABU. Like, what is that? So you see, you're like, all right, whatever. And then you keep seeing it. You're like, every month, and you're seeing this guy, and you're like, who is this guy? And then you finally see a picture of this guy, and he looks crazy. It's like, what is this, right? Because you're so used to when you're watching the national wrestling stuff, on TV, with WWF and even the WCW to an extent, you're seeing very polished guys, you know what I'm saying, they're big as hell, and they're pretty defined, and what I'm saying, they look pretty clean cut and all that good stuff, good haircut and all that good stuff and everything, you know what I'm saying? And then you see this picture, this is a very seedy picture of Sabu, and he looks like he's already on the verge of death. You see scars going across his chest. You see his baggy pants and everything, the crazy hair, the really long stringy hair and everything. The face on him as well too. He looked like he was about to murder somebody and everything. And then you read what kind of matches he was in. You're like, wait, what did I just read? This guy Sabu was in an electrifying barbed wire match. What the hell is that? Right? What the heck? And yeah, man. So it's tripping you out because you're not used to reading things like that. And we're talking about 92, 93 here. You're not used to reading things like that or seeing things like that from a professional wrestling standpoint. The most you're gonna get for pro wrestling when it comes to violence is just going to be a steel cage match and I'm talking about the OG cage with the blue bars. You know what I'm saying? So we're talking about that business right there. But then when you read about this man talking about Sabu, talking about being in matches that involve barbed wire, you're like, what is this? And then in adjacent to that, going back to what Clint said earlier, he was wrestling with this company called Eastern Championship Wrestling. What the heck is Eastern Championship Wrestling? Which eventually becomes Extreme Championship Wrestling. So when you go back to it and you're reading about this guy Sabu, who's in these electrifying C4 bomb, explosive cage matches, whoever may have you with barbed wire all over them, and then a promotion called Extreme Championship Wrestling, immediately the 14-year-old version of you is like, I need to know everything about this, right? I want to know everything there is known to man about this man Sabu and what this Eastern Championship Wrestling business is as well too. This Extreme Championship Wrestling. I need to know everything about this, and that's where it all started. So it really was about just reading it over, going back, because I'm gonna be honest with you, Sabu is the reason. That was my gateway to ECW, but that was also my excuse as well too, and my motivation to continuously go back and buy that PWI magazine every month when it came out. So when I was going to Walgreens, I was saving up my little allowance money, whatever it was and everything. I'm like, I gotta go back to Walgreens. I gotta pick up the WWF magazine. I gotta pick up the PWI magazine as well too, because I gotta see what the Sabu guy talking about, And And yeah, man. So like, and it was crazy. So then you graduate, and old heads, y'all remember this too. You graduated from in your fandom from owning from being a magazine head to like you find more friends who are into pro wrestling, and y'all start trading tapes. So a buddy of mine, one year, my mom and I, we moved to a different neighborhood, and I met these two guys. Their name was Shane and Matt. And what's up to Shane and Matt? Hope y'all are well. Shane was good. Well, I haven't talked to Matt in a while, but I talked to Shane, here and there and everything like that. And Shane was one who put me on game a lot. So Shane, he was really into wrestling, and he put me on game with a friend of his who had a whole lot of ECW tapes that he was able to collect or whatever may have you. And so we're talking about like 95, 96 here. You know what I mean? So we're talking about like the mid 90s. And so obviously information and also just access to media and everything was not as easy as it is right now. Right now we can go on YouTube and get whatever we want that's ever been created in mankind. But back then you had to be pretty unique, because he had some kind of like, he had like one of those, like, how you always knew somebody had like a black box or something like that. You know what I mean? But he had some kind of like weird black box satellite situation where he was able to get some like illegal cable. And within the illegal cable, he was able to get a channel that got ECW wrestling, and he taped everything. And so this dude had a bunch of VHS tapes of ECW. And once again, a friend of mine looking out, he was like, hey, like, say, hey, my friend, he's never seen ECW. You gotta let him borrow some tapes. Hey, I got you. Because I knew about it, but I never seen it. So he let me borrow a whole stack of tapes, and I couldn't stop watching those tapes, man. And of course, those tapes that got me put me on game with Sabu, Tommy Dreamer, the Sandman, Raven, the 911, Mikey Wimprek, all those guys, man, and eventually RVD and everything. You know what I mean? But like, that's what put me up on game. But in Taz. But I think my thing was, I want to see what this Sabu guy was like. I was so eager to see what he was like. And so I'm watching a match with him. I can't remember if it was Mikey Wimprek or whoever it was, man. But Sabu was just all over the place with this match. And just watching that old school ECW environment, that old school ECW vibe, that just like, oh my goodness, it gave me such a thirst of what all was out there, that was not necessarily called the World Wrestling Federation. And it really just ignited a new level of love that I had for pro wrestling. But I was like, I really wanted more of this ECW stuff, So by this time, I'm pretty like, I'm pretty well versed in terms of like understanding it and being able to like, and being able to see however much I could watch of it, however I could be, via the friend of a friend. But I never forget, and old heads watching this, y'all remember this as well too. It was 97, was it? Or 96? I want to say it was 97. I think it was 97. Jerry Lawler had been making a whole lot of like slick commentary about ECW, like on WWF program. And he would like off like, he would kind of comment them every so often here and there. But even before that though, hold on. And Clint, if you're still watching, help me out here. Before that, it was the King of the Ring in 96. In June of 96, when they were in Philadelphia, and this is the WWF is in Philadelphia for the King of the Ring. And during a WWF pay-per-view, the crowd, and they're in Philadelphia, where ECW is the home of, the crowd started chanting. They started an ECW, ECW, ECW chant. And those three guys that you always saw at the ECW shows all the damn time, the hat guy, the guy with the signs who wore the glasses, and then that one dude who had like the long black beard. He looked like Alice Cooper a little bit. The long black beard and the long black hair. They were all ringside. And so when the chant started, you saw the three dudes who you always see on the ECW joints getting up and getting wild, and they're like, and they started chanting. You're like, oh shoot. And that same pay-per-view, I think that Sandman and Tommy Dreamer were sitting ringside, and they were kind of there to and Paul Heyman, and they were there to antagonize the wrestlers a little bit and throw them off their game, which they did. So when you watch, for real, go back if you can, go back and watch King of the Ring '96, and you will see that when they see the ECW guys sitting at ringside, the WWF wrestlers are like, what the hell are you doing here? You know what I'm saying? Like, they're like, this ain't part of the show. So fast forward to, I believe it's January of '97, when King kept on making these slick comments about ECW and whatnot. Paul Heyman jumped in, he just came out of nowhere, jumped in the ring, and he was like, hey, if you want to do this, I can bring my guys next week. Yeah, he was on the phone. He said, I can bring my guys next week. Wherever you're going to be in New York, I'll bring my ECW guys next week, and we could do this. Because you want to keep on talking slick, right? That next week, if they're in New York, in the Manhattan Center, they pull up. ECW pulls up to Monday Night Raw, and I will never forget it because I remember I was in high school, and it was during wrestling season, and I just knew I'm like, I don't care what I'm doing that Monday night. I just know that after practice, I have to rush home. I have to make sure I am home. I have my meal. I have something to eat. I have a beverage, and I am in front of my TV at I think Raw came on at 7 or 8 o'clock. I can't remember that time. Oh, Dan's here. What's up, Dan? Dan, I can't remember if Raw came on at 7 or 8 o'clock in '97 or whenever they did that invasion Raw. And I'm like, I had to be in front of my TV at that time, and I gotta see this. I cannot miss this for the world. And man, did that Raw deliver. And so we would see, and there was, like I said, it was the Manhattan Center, which was like one of the original place for Monday Night Raw. A very small venue, a very intimate venue, a very historic venue at the same time for wrestling. And and you see Paul Heyman come into the ring, yelling at Jerry Lawler. He said, "Your challenge has been accepted. ECW is in the house." And then you had the Eliminators come out, and they did the total elimination move on one of the jobbers and everything like that. Just said the whole scene. The place goes insanely crazy, right? It was amazing. So the night we saw RV. I believe we saw RVD. I think we saw the Dudley Boys. I think we saw the BWO. We saw a bunch of guys and everything. I think we saw Taz. But the one thing aside from the initial, what stood out to me was, I think it was like towards the end of the show, but there was a big old brawl that was happening. And everything. And I want to say it was like something like the B player WWF guys and the ECW guys, and they were brawling by the entranceway where they came out at. And if you remember, the entranceway were these big, huge, giant letters. There was an R, A, and a W. There were big, giant letters that it came around from. And when they cut over to the guys, you see somebody at the top of the R. And you like, what the hell? Who else would it be at the top of the R, flying off of it just to jump on top of everybody who was having that melee on the ground? Who else would it be but SABU, coming off the top of the R and crashing into everybody? And what was great about it was that it was setting up a because they were having a pay-per-view in a couple of months. the very first ECW pay-per-view, which was called Barely Legal. And it's 97. Yeah, 97. And and Taz and Sabu had a match that was scheduled for that pay-per-view. And they were building that up properly, because if memory serves me correct, if memory serves me right, they built that single matchup for, I want to say, for a good like 6 to 8 months, maybe, or something like that. About 6 to 8 months, I believe they built that matchup for, where you never saw Taz and Sabu touch each other. You know what I mean? Say they would tease it, because they would show, like, because if you remember how ECW was, like, the matches were all super random, you know, for the most part. And so you would see, like, you know, like a brawl would happen, you know, 911 would be out there brawling with somebody and everything, or like with like Ian Rodden, and then Taz would come out and he'd help Ian Rodden, and he beat up on 911. The lights would go out, and when they come back on, you see Taz on one end of the ring, and you see Sabu at the other end of the ring, and they just be looking at each other, and the crowd be going crazy. We're about to see it. They're about to think so. We're about to see it. The crowd would be going crazy and everything, and you see Taz, you know, he'd be like, you know, rubbing his hands, like, let's do this. I want to kill you. Sabu, like, how he doing right? Like, like, how you doing right here? So weird. Like, how you doing right here? In the image, you know, you see Sabu, you know, point up to the sky and everything like that. You know what I'm saying? And then everybody would go crazy, and then they would charge at each other. But right at the right moment, the lights would go out. Everything would go black. And then the crowd would be like, boo! And the lights go back up, and you wouldn't see them. They'll be gone. But that's the concept they would do. They would tease it that way. And they teased it like that way for so many months, just to build up to that match at Barely Legal. So, of course, needless to say, when that happened on Raw, you know, it was probably the closest that Sabu ever got to Taz, but they didn't really, you know, like, exchange hands, because it was just more so just like the body falling on top of everyone else, and Taz happened to be there. But like I said, that builds up to the actual event of Barely Legal that took place a couple months later. And of course, they had a great match and everything. But yeah, man, like those are the moments right there. I get chills now. So I've been thinking about that. And in one match, when people ask me, when people say, "What was your favorite match? One of your favorite matches of all time?" Of course, if you know me, my all-time favorite match of all time in history of wrestling is Macho King Randy Savage against the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 7. I will dedicate a special episode of 23rd Hour just to talk about that match. I can talk about that. I can write a dissertation and do a complete analytical breakdown of how that match is absolutely perfect. Except for one thing that still irritates me. But like I said, we can have a whole conversation about that at another time. All right, that's not today. This is about Sabu. So, but one of my favorite matches of all time involved Sabu, and it was a tag match where Sabu and RVD they tag team to go against Hayabusa and he in WWF he's known as Hakushi. His name in New Japan was Jinsuke. Oh crap, I can't remember, Suzuki or something like that. But Hakushi, for the lack of his real name. My apologies about that as well too. But man, oh my God! If you've never seen this match, and for Superheads, I know y'all have seen that match. Please, if you've never seen that match is unbelievable. It is a complete, just like every moment of that match is a highlight reel. It really is. Like it's nonstop. It's about a 25-minute match. I think it was at one of the heat waves. I believe it was. I can't remember, but it's unbelievably great. Yeah, it's just one of those matches where you just absolutely have to watch it. So please go in SABU and RVD absolutely tear it up with them. And even beyond that, RVD and SABU have probably one of the best rivalries as well too, with each other. And that was with their match. Whenever I want to put someone up on game, when it came to what other wrestling it was out there besides WWF, I would immediately go to a SABU match, preferably with RVD. The things that we saw with those matches, where we would see not only the offense from RVD, but we would see the risks that SABU was taking when it came to executing his offenses. He would flip over the top rope onto the floor, onto a table. He would, jump on the rope. It's the top rope itself, not the top rope turnbuckle in the corner, the top rope itself, and launch himself off of that bad boy to jump at his opponent who's in the crowd. So he would be jumping in the crowd. This man would be going everywhere, just flying all over the place, putting his body on the line, doing the most craziest stuff that you could ever imagine. And the thing was, what was great about him was that you never saw the same match twice with that man. You never saw the same match twice. You always got something different from him all the time. So seeing him just coming up and watching him work in that heyday era was such a treat, was such an incredible treat that we were able to get to be able to really experience what he was able to deliver to us, as fans. And then you fast forward to, we're talking about 2006 here or so. You're talking about 2006. You fast forward, and this is some years after the WWF had acquired ECW, and this is when they had implemented the one night stand shows, and this was kind of like the ECW reunions. And they this is when WWF signed a whole bunch of ECW guys. They were reviving the brand. And so now we finally get to see SABU. We finally get to see SABU in the World Wrestling Federation, under a full-time contract with this newly revised version of ECW. So of course, as a fan, you are just ecstatic about this. You are so hyped and see, how this is going to be and everything, and what was going to become about this, and see, oh my God, we're actually going to see SABU in the WWF and WWE. It's crazy, you know what I mean? And it was cool, but you could tell that there was a lot that was told to him to scale things back when it came to his style. We saw what we normally saw from him every once in a while, but we also, because WWE has a particular style of wrestling that's catered more towards it being a television program rather than a pro wrestling match. You could tell that he had to adapt to that style. And I think because that pivot took place, it may have not have been conducive to him, because he's used to a certain type of speed, a certain type of style, a certain type of objective when it came to how he maneuvered himself in the ring. And because that style didn't complement what he was used to doing, I don't think that he really was able to ever adapt to that. Because needless to say, his run in the WWE wasn't as long as you may have thought it might have been, because he came in for that one night stand match in 2006, and then he was at WrestleMania 23 because it was in Detroit, Michigan. He was part of that whole New Breed ECW storyline, and he just kind of he just wasn't really there anymore. After that, I don't think he renewed his contract, and I think he just kind of found a lot of love as a free agent. So then we see him. We saw him in TNA, for some matches. We see him in the Indies and everything. So Sabu was one of those characters that you would see every so often and all that good stuff. And he would pop up. He would pop up every now and then in the WWE for a special one-off appearance, but nothing long term like how it was in 2006. So yeah, but Sabu, you were still reading about him online. You were still hearing about him online, and he was doing shoot interviews, and with a lot of the wrestling news outlets, and he was still going to conventions. He was still going to he was still making personal appearances and all this stuff and everything. So he was still very active. He was still very active, on the wrestling scene, and so he never left it. And and that's the thing, is that Sabu was just kind of like one of those guys that you just always kind of like knew, like, yeah, he was still around, he was still active, so much to the fact that the man had his retirement match, which I probably should take the quotes away, but he had his retirement match the week of WrestleMania this year against Joey Janela at the Joey Janela Spring Break show. And that week of Mania was great. Like I talked to you guys about in the last stream, that was a really great week for wrestling just in general, because there was so much wrestling that was happening, and across the board on Triller, and that's with the collective, and the Joey Janela Spring Break show was no exception to that rule. And that's who we wrestled. We wrestled Sabu in that match, and that was one of those. I'm like, wait, Joey Janela's wrestling who? Sabu tonight? Okay, I am definitely staying up until 1 in the morning so I can watch this match. I gotta see this. I gotta see this. And it was something else. It was something else. Sabu, he was out there. He didn't. I mean, obviously, we're talking about a man who is well within his age. So of course, we're not expecting what we've seen of Sabu in the past. You know what I mean? But we saw that he was still out there, giving it his all. And of course, the match was tailor made to look good. Joey did a great job in terms of making sure that he was able to sell and do moves that didn't and constitute him putting himself in too much danger. There were times where Sabu was calling out spots super loud. For real, he's like, no, do that again. Throw me in the corner and then hit me with the clothesline. It's like, no. Like they hear you in the balcony, brother, for real. So, but God bless him, man, for real, because he was going through it. He was going through the match, and even did some extreme hardcore spots in that match too, where he went through like a glass door or something like that, or something of that nature. It was crazy, and he was still bleeding and everything, like he always has done, like we've always been accustomed to be doing and everything. And yeah, man, it really was his last match. And when you look back on it, and like I said, that was probably 3 weeks ago, whenever WrestleMania was. And this really was a prime example of somebody who was doing what they loved to do. And age did not stop them. Age did not prohibit them. Age did not tell them, you're not good enough to be able to do this, because in his heart of hearts, in his soul, he knew where his heart was. He knew where his love was. He knew what it was that made him complete. I feel like we can all learn a lot from that alone, just in general. We tend to kind of position ourselves at times to where we feel like we have to do certain things because that's what the status quo requires. We have to go by certain patterns because it's what society tells us that is what needs to be done. We tend to go certain paths because someone else told us to go in that certain path, and if someone else are telling us to do that path, then it must be the right path to take. But what about that path? What about that objective? What about that journey that you create for yourself? What about that journey that you find true happiness in? What about that journey that lets you know and reminds you why you're here? That lets you know that the reason why you're on this earth, the reason why you have breath in your body, the reason why that you're able to walk and talk and breathe on a daily basis is because you have a passion, you have a love for doing A, B, C, X, Y, Z. What about that voice? How important is that voice to us? How many times are we going to ignore that voice? That voice talking to us. How many times are we going to put that voice in our back pocket? Yeah, I'll get you. I gotta do this first, though. How many people do you think left this earth, left this planet, left this life, who left this life without being able to fully immerse themselves into what it is that they love doing? Fully immerse themselves into the choices that they knew were going to ultimately make them happy on an everyday basis. I think a lot. I think a lot. I think a lot. I think a lot have departed from this life who have felt unfulfilled, who have felt less than, who felt that they didn't reach their potentials, and people who have left this earth who didn't feel the true happiness that they deserve. No matter how old they were, no matter where they were living, no matter what type of shape they were in life, no matter what it was that was happening with them, you know, they left a life that could have been. But then you think about those people who actually do pursue. You think about those people who actually do move forward in the right direction. You think about those people who actually do listen to that voice that's in them, that's telling them, this is what fulfills you. This is who you are. This is the reason why you are here. This is this is what completes who you are. They listen to that voice and they say, you know what? I am worth the risk. Let that marinate for a second. I am worth the risk. I am. I'm worth that. I'm worth being able to trust myself. I'm worth being able to believe in myself. I'm worth being able to promise myself that I'm going to find that fulfillment. And I'm going to go after it. And I'm going to make it happen. Because we only had this one shot in this life. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where I'm at in life. It doesn't matter like what's in my way. I'm going to find a way to make it happen. Because ultimately, everyone, we have been faced. We have stared challenges and adversities and issues face to face, eye to eye, for many years, our entire lives. Some of us, every day is a battle. But you know what is also consistently true? We always find a way to make it work. Always. Every battle, every situation that's come across ourselves, we always find a way. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer than what we anticipate. Sometimes it might be a little bit harder than we anticipate. Sometimes it might take a little bit longer than we anticipate. Sometimes there might be a little more backlash than we had anticipated, but we always find a way to make it work. This is a mindset that I've adopted for myself personally, especially this year. And I'll get more insight in a later time. But that type of mentality I've learned is so incredibly vital for our lives, just for us to be able to find adequate completion of who we are. And it's so imperative for us to be able to find adequate completion of who we are as we go into these next phases of our lives, as we're able to grow and continue to be who we are. completion, not richness, not riches, not wealth, not notoriety, not fame, not having a gajillion followers or anything of that nation. It's none of that. None of that's the goal. The goal is completion for yourself. That's the goal. Completion. Happiness. Fulfillment. And realizing and being able to really go after the reason why you are here. SABU did that for us. SABU did that. SABU did that for us on a day in basis, a night in, night out basis, still wrestling at his extended age as well too, because this is what completed him. And he did it for us. It didn't matter what city it was, it didn't matter what the conditions of the match was, the promoter, whatever it was. He knew what he loved to do, and he knew he loved doing what completed him. And that was professional wrestling. And that's what we got from him. And that's the reason why 3 weeks ago was the last time we saw him in the ring. And 3 weeks later, he was called home. That's completion. And that's what we all strive for. Completion and happiness. So with that, 52 minutes into this show, which I really thought I was going to do like 15, 20 minutes, but we know how it is when we get on topic, we get on the roll. And that's why I love talking to y'all. But with that though, before I sign off, I just want to say thank you. I just want to say thank you to SABU. But before that, let me read a couple of these comments real quick, y'all, before I sign out. Dan, what's up, man? So King of the Ring 95 with a chance of, that was 95? Mind Games 96 was when Dreamer, Sandman, Heyman, and those. Really? I thought, no, because King of the Ring 95 was when Mabel won. It was that one? Oh, you're right. Because 96 was when Austin won the King of the Ring, and that was in Milwaukee. Yeah, you're right. Okay. I take it back. Dan Sager, I've known Dan since high school. He is literally a wrestling historian, like literally. So no, you're right about that. You're right. That was okay, cool. There were a few times during WCW's 83 weeks that I wondered how Raw didn't get the higher rating. This is one of those weeks, although I think Raw was still 1 hour at the time while Nachos. Yeah, I agree, because I'm with you. I thought that week Raw was gonna beat WCW. So I'm like, there's no way in the world that people are not gonna want to watch what's going on Raw. And it come to find out, WCW still won that that rating war that week. I'm like, how? That was like the greatest Raw ever, man. For real. So let's see this. B. Look, Christina. B. And be well. All right. But y'all, thank you so much for tuning in tonight for this special edition of the 23rd hour. Like I said before, I just wanted to kind of come up on here, chat up game with y'all, and just kind of talk about SABU. Like we experienced a very deep loss today in the wrestling world, as wrestling fans. And like I said, this is one of those. This is one of those ones where we're going to be, we're not going to be right for a while, but it's okay though, because I always say that with loss comes a gain of memories, a gain of like thoughts, a gain of just being able a chance to reflect. It gives you an opportunity to be able to really reflect on who was called home and reflect on the reasons why they made you smile in the first place, and reflect on the reasons why they made you feel like that they made you feel something and what that feeling was, and never let go of that feeling. The reason why I say never let go of that feeling is because that feeling that you won't let go, that you receive from them, that's how you know that they're going to live forever, because of that feeling. That feeling is going to be always, it's never going to leave you. It'll never leave you. So thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you, SABU. Thank you to the most homicidal, suicidal, genocidal, death-defying man in professional wrestling. I think I'm gonna watch some SABU tapes after I get off, but it won't be tonight. It'll be always, because SABU really played a really major part in my life as a wrestling fan, and I'm gonna miss that man. And I'm glad I was able to see him live. I was glad I was able to see him on television. I'm glad I was able to see him on tape. I'm glad just to be able to live the same life and breathe the same air that man did, and be able to see the amazing thing he did. What a legend. What a freaking legend he is. He'll never be forgotten about. But join us next time, 23rd hour. I think our next episode might be after Double or Nothing, AEW. So I'll let you guys know. I'll keep you all posted and everything, so be on the lookout for all that stuff. Be sure to follow B-Side Studios on Facebook, on IG, on our Twitch page, especially our YouTube as well too. We have all of our old episodes on there as well too. We have a lot of cool stuff that's happening in B-Side. Woo! You guys are gonna be amazed with some stuff we got cooking right now. So just be on the lookout with what's coming out coming down the pipeline. I can talk. All right. You all have a beautiful day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, what's left of it. I know tomorrow's Monday, but whatever, it's all good. Remember, completion. That's what everything's all about. And as I say that, happy Mother's Day. We complete this episode. I'll see y'all later. Ciao.